Hello, somebody who looks like Henrik. Are you a human? Henrik, welcome and welcome everybody to this session on AI agents and the impact on the world of work and org design. So Henrik is not a random person who we invited to talk with us today about AI. Because Henrik, I know you mentioned you had changed your jobs from being an agile consultant to dealing with AI.
Yeah.
Like, how come? Why?
Yeah, it was a major pivot. It was just like going this way and then suddenly whoop, going that way. Uh, Basically because everyone started fussing about Chat GPT when it just came. And I was like kind of fascinated by it. But it seemed a bit like a toy in the beginning. It was really impressive, but not super useful. But then GPT-4 came and there was a lot of talk about that. And I decided to give it a go. So I took a week off and went off to my kind of cabin and just, closed the door and turned off my phone for like a week and just started toying with this technology. And then I got so shocked that I basically decided that this is going to be what I do from now on, because it changes kind of everything.
Yeah, and you probably are the person who have been toying, as you say, with these tools more than anybody else from us here. At least I can speak for myself. You've been on this journey for what, 2 years now?
About a couple of years now, yeah.
Couple years, yeah, amazing. And now you have a book on this since
Yeah,
a week.
I did a brain dump into a book.
Yeah, amazing. So how are the sales going for the book?
So it was up on LeanPub while being made, but it sold a few hundred copies even while writing the book. So I can recommend LeanPub if you're an author, just to get feedback while writing the book. But now it just came out on Amazon, so I don't know what the sales are yet. It's just been out for a few days.
And the title of the book is
Generative AI in a Nutshell, same as my colorful video that I made about a year ago.
Which had like what, 5 million views now? Or?
I don't know what it's up to, but it's probably getting close to 3 million, I think, at least.
Wow.
It climbed very quickly. It seemed to have kind of hit a target that, or like,
yeah,
appeals to people.
Hopefully your book is gonna hit it too. And listen, like everybody speaks about AI these days. So AI is like almost everywhere. And now the new term, like agentic stuff, agents. And people used to say, I've heard that year 2025 is going to be a year of AI agents. And already today we can see the new announcements, coming every day. Like yesterday, Figma and Lovable announced a new product where you can just chat, and generate an app. You have what, Operator from OpenAI since yesterday, which can like book your hotels and flights and everything.
Yeah, a lot is happening.
It's like, it's not just happening. It actually seems like it is accelerating even. It's like more and more things. And I know that you, Henrik, are also working on your own agentic platform. So,
yes.
yeah, we'd love to hear more about your insights about like why agents, why now, what are the possibilities, and eventually drive this discussion into which impact this is going to have hypothetically on the world of work.
Sounds super interesting, which is, of course, why I work with it. So where do we start?
I mean, tell us about AI agents in general and what you've been learning about them, and maybe a few words about your products, your platform, how you see people using that.
Yes. So the background was when I started looking into this technology. There's two ways of using it, really. One is as a end user using things like ChatGPT and chatting, and then there is as a developer where you write code against an API where you're doing the same thing but you're just writing code instead. And I experimented a lot quite early. I built a little chatbot platform to experiment with it, and quite quickly came into the notion of agents. And what I mean by that is when you use ChatGPT, it is essentially passive. It just sits there doing nothing until you talk to it. So if we compare it to like a work colleague, imagine a colleague that sits in his office and just sleeps. And then when you knock on the door and say, hey, Bob, can you check this or that thing? And Bob wakes up and goes, sure. And then Bob is super productive and knows basically everything about everything. But then after he's finished responding to your query, he goes back to sleep again. That's kind of what ChatGPT is. And it's even more limited because it doesn't have any tools by default. So, if we take Bob as our kind of hypothetical colleague, he sits in his office. He can't go online. He can't print stuff. He can't order hot dogs. There's so much he can't do. All he can do is answer a question, or give you text responses. But even with that, it was super useful, really, really useful. But if we imagine taking this colleague Bob and giving him access to tools, so he can actually do stuff. He can make phone calls. He can, for example, print stuff, or sign up for services and just do stuff, send emails. Then Bob becomes more useful. But Bob becomes even more useful if you also give him a job that he can do on his own when you're not in the room with him, prompting him. So, for example, if Bob's job is to fix bugs, then he can proactively watch for bugs in your system and fix stuff and be kind of part of your team. So that's to me what agents are. It's taking basically wrapping an LLM with code, and what the code does is it adds agency in that it can do things on its own, either on a schedule or by certain triggers, and that it has access to tools so it can do stuff other than just respond to queries. That's what an agent is, and it makes them just so incredibly much more useful. That's why I very quickly noticed that this is the interesting bit. And then I met some other people, and we created a company in Sweden called Ymnig. I guess I can write in the chat. It's a bit Swedish word, unpronounceable, but that's the name that's the company. And it's basically we help companies learn and apply generative AI. And then what almost always happens in that journey is they realize that, oh, we need agents, because that's when it really becomes useful. It's a colleague that you can connect into your workflow at some point and give it a clear responsibility, and it becomes like a colleague. And then because that's I think every company is going to have agents everywhere in the future. Then we created a platform for it to make it easy to spin up new types of agents.
So Henrik, hi, it's Roland. You were telling about Bob and enabling Bob to do more interesting stuff, but I remember I saw a recording of yours where you were explaining how, I don't know, this AI that you were using or that you created was not called Bob, but he was yes, Jeeves, and he was taking over in a way that was like unexpected. So how can you relate your usage of AI and enabling AI for certain purposes and combine that with possible fears of AI taking over? What's your experience with that up to the
that's I think super interesting. In more practical terms, well, there is the existential risk, which I think is real. But if you look at more pragmatic kind of the risk of an AI doing something dumb or inappropriate, we're in the early stage of this technology, and companies like mine that explore this technology, we're always pushing the bounds, finding the limits. And I put up this fun little article and a video about Jeeves, which was an agent that we gave it just a lot of freedom just to see what it would do. And this is part of our learning journey. And what we've learned so far about agents is right now the technology is quite immature, you could say. You need really good prompt engineering skills to create a useful agent. And that's why platforms like ours try to build that in a little bit to create safeguards. Because by default, current LLMs, such as GPT or Claude, aren't built to be agents. So what happens if you give them tools is they get super enthusiastic. They're like, oh, I can send emails. Yay, I'm going to look for excuses to send emails to people. Just as an example. And you can prompt that away. You can put in safeguards, both in code and prompts, to solve that. But the default behavior is somewhat unhinged. They will get very creative. And our experience so far is mostly positive. Like the agent can take initiative. It was unable to carry out the task, but it found another way. And often really impressive ways to solve a problem, like a human would do. Like, oh, I was unable to do this thing, so I found another creative way. And sometimes it'll take initiatives on its own. So it'll suddenly just get in contact and say, hey, Henrik, there's a problem here. I want you to solve it. Here's a bunch of information about the problem. And by the way, I've also contacted Jim because he seems to work with this area. So it takes initiatives in a super impressive way, but sometimes also inappropriately. I mean, like, listen, Bob, I just gave you this job. Don't start doing other stuff. So that's an important balance to find. And what we found works best now, and I think this is what companies are going to need to deal with, is think of it as hiring an intern who's incredibly smart and very enthusiastic. Maybe you don't need to give the intern access to every system in your company, because they will get really enthusiastic and want to come up with cool stuff to do. Maybe you give them a more limited job and a more limited set of tools just for that job. Start with that, and then gradually give them more responsibilities. So that's what we find works very well. You take an agent and you kind of box it in a little bit with code. You write some code to limit what it's supposed to do, what it can do, and then you give it some freedom within those bounds. That's the best kind of compromise. As time passes, the models are going to get better at working in agentic ways. I think this is more like it's a little bit immature. But right now, it's possible to get concrete value from agents in a safe way if you combine code with prompts. I don't know if that answered the question.
I think it did. Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess we are at the early ages, you can say, of AI and especially of agents, AI agents. So I guess a lot of people, have limited imagination. And I think you call it prompt imagination in your course or something where, I'm asking ChatGPT to actually help me brainstorm where I could use agents because I have no idea.
Yeah.
So like, I know you've built some, so I'd like to dive into maybe some examples. I know also you probably are in the early days of your platform and probably talking to your customers using that. So
Yeah.
I'd like to hear some examples. And let's start with something simple. I know you built a Twitter X agent, which makes some jokes and stuff. So how does it work actually?
So yeah, in terms of examples, I definitely agree. The biggest constraint now is prompt imagination, in that just coming up with the idea of where to use agents. And we're starting to see some very concrete, since we work very close to clients, and we also use it a lot ourselves to do a lot of dog fooding. Then we're starting to find some what we think of as kind of golden use cases, places where agents provide a lot of value today that you can't get from just ChatGPT. And one example of that is, I guess if we could bring up that example, I made a Twitter account for my AI sidekick. The Twitter account is called Egbert. I'll write it in the chat. Egbert says. He's on Twitter. He's going to be on Blue Sky soon. And that's an example of where it's an agent that is given the responsibility to run a social media channel. In this case, it's a sarcastic channel. It's joking around. So Egbert is an AI making fun of humans, kind of. So he talks about things like how we're going to solve the human hallucination problem, right? Things like that. But anyway, right now, Agent Egbert he runs on our platform. He is semi-autonomous. In that everything he posts is moderated by me right now. So he's you can say that he's in a training phase. I don't trust him to just post stuff on his own. So everything is moderated by me. And then he maintains a document of upcoming posts and historical posts, so he knows what he's been posting. And I've told him to post to kind of that every day we want to post something new, and we schedule a bunch of stuff in advance. So basically, once per week, I go to our platform and I have a conversation with Egbert, and we discuss what are some fun topics to talk about in the future. Sometimes his ideas, sometimes my ideas, but he always phrases the actual tweets because I can't phrase it as funny as him. And then we kind of agree on some. Sometimes I'm like, I like that idea, but could you phrase it differently? Can you add a twist to it? And then we discuss, and after a while, like, that's good, let's go with this. And then he schedules it. So yeah, that's kind of the setup. He's semi-autonomous, but over time, as I start trusting him better, then I'm going to give him more autonomy, and that's kind of the general approach with agents. But I think the most common use case right now with clients we have right now is research, or more like business intelligence research. In Swedish, it's called omvärldsbevakning, watching what's happening in the world. Because in almost every company, people are a little bit like stressed over, oh, I should pay more attention to what our competitors are doing, what are new trends in the market, what's happening with new regulation in our banking industry or whatever, and they never quite have time. And that's where agents fit very nicely, because then you get around the problem of, oh, this agent is a bit scary. I don't want to give him access to all of our sensitive company data, because what exactly is the agent going to do with it, right? That can be a bit scary. But an agent that just does research and goes out online and checks what's happening, and then filters it down and adapts the message, maybe adds some analysis, sends to the right people, and then is available to chat around it. That's a pretty safe agent that almost every company can gain use from. So most of our early clients now use agents like that from us. But another example is investment screening, a company that does investments and they need to look around for potential prospects. And that's really kind of boring work that just takes time and effort. And so we made an agent for them that does the grunt work of that and kind of gives them a short list, and then they can discuss around that.
These are good examples, but the most prominent example that I keep on hearing is cost reduction. Don't you see this happening?
Yeah, cost reduction is a very broad term.
By replacing people with an agent.
Yeah. So let's actually look at those two things. The cases I'm talking about now don't really replace people. For example, the research thing is there's not, in these companies we work with, it's not like there's a team of people that do research and now they're going to get fired. It's more like research is something that they don't have time to do. And now by doing it, then everyone has time to do what they really want to do instead. Same thing with like me as a coder. I use Cursor, an awesome development environment, and they've now introduced agents inside that tool. And I use that to basically 10x my own productivity. It's not because I want to fire everybody. In my company, it just means we can do 10x more stuff. But there are cases though where, like, if you have 1,000 support technicians doing customer support, and their job is look at an email that comes in, match that to some FAQ, and write some suggested tip to that customer, some suggested response. That work is easy for an AI to do really well. So those jobs are disappearing very quickly. So there's going to be, like, I think, a duality there. Some types of jobs are just going to disappear and already have disappeared, which is, of course, happens with every technical revolution. And then in many other cases, it's more like it's not jobs being reduced, it's tasks being replaced. And the people who had those tasks are grateful because typically it's the task that they want to get rid of. That's kind of where I see the biggest value. I'm worried about the firing thing because not only, of course, because it's traumatic with people involved, but I think as a company, be really careful with that. Because in theory, if you give your developers access to a tool like Cursor, they will become 10x more productive. And I have personal experience with that for myself and others. It's a radical improvement that is hard to overstate. But you'd be really stupid if you use that as an excuse to fire half your developers. Because what then happens is, sure, you'll still get more stuff done than before, but now your developers are negative to this technology. They're not going to be incentivized to look for even better ways of working because that just means more of their friends being fired. So I think companies should be very careful with that. And ideally, just think of it as we take the people we have and we give them superpowers.
Yeah, I like the way you frame it. You seem to be also very positive on the impact of AI despite the risk. And I think I also share with you this a techno optimism, you can say. So you've mentioned research. Do you also see AI agents being used in a product development organization in the field of helping product managers with their existing tasks? Because I hear a lot of experts actually double clicking on this and saying that this will be probably the first real impact in
Yes.
R&D organizations. So a few words on this.
Yes, definitely. I think in terms of actual real impact, I think coding is probably the most dramatic. Already since a year back, been this incredible, and that has follow-up effects. So when coding no longer is the bottleneck, when coding is easy, then that changes the fundamental nature of product development. For example, as a product manager, you no longer need to go to a development team to ask them to build a prototype for some idea you have. Instead, you just go to your favorite LLM and it'll just do that for you. And then when you go to your team, you bring that prototype. And you're not wasting your team's time building simple stuff. Instead, they can focus on architecture. They can focus on things like working with the product management to interact directly with customers, and maybe even build prototypes with the customer live. So that's just one example of how the nature of the work changes. But I think if we look at product management, as with any task, what people need to do is look very carefully and critically at how you spend your time. And what you probably come up with is that about half of what you do is not really highly qualified work. Get rid of that using AI, and then that'll save time for you to do qualified work. For example, taking some high-level idea for a feature and finding out how to split it into smaller deliverables. That used to be highly qualified work. It isn't anymore. It's a lot easier now. So you can get AI help to do that, and then you can get on with more important work. So that's one example.
Yeah, and guys, please feel free to raise questions in the chat or so. We have a question from Jose. I will read. Do you see some companies relying only on those prototype and say, "Great, we are making money with that prototype. Let's not go any further"? I guess the question is, do you see companies will only limit application of AI to the prototypes, or do you see this also going to the like full-fledged development anytime soon?
Definitely going to full-fledged. I think it's already in full-fledged development. It's kind of what I work with every day, production code.
Mhm.
Yeah, help. I just think it's similar to when you, as a human, write code. You kind of have different hats on when you're writing prototype code versus production code. And it's same thing with an AI model. You're giving it a different hat to wear. Are we creating production code that needs to stand the test of time, or are we quickly just getting something to put in front of our users? What's interesting though is even that nature changes. In the past, it used to be like, as a developer, you write prototype code and then to get feedback. And then when you write the real version, you got to write the code properly.
Mm.
You shouldn't ship the prototype code. I'm not so sure about that anymore, because if you look at the reason why you shouldn't ship the prototype code is because it becomes a maintenance nightmare later on. What if code writing is free almost?
Yeah.
Then that changes too. Maybe you should ship the prototype code and then rewrite it from scratch whenever you're not happy with it. So a lot of stuff becomes radically different. We're not there quite yet. At the moment, I would say, you still need to really pay attention to code quality. There still needs to be a human in the loop paying attention to the code. But I think within a year, code is probably going to be something which is just throwaway. And then that changes, again, the fundamental nature of product development. So it's very interesting and a little bit stressful, because there's all this wisdom we've built up over many, many years of how product development can be done effectively. And now we need to go back and really revisit and question everything. Some things will stay the same, but a lot of things will be different.
But that's interesting, because you say we have built up all this wisdom. And
Yeah.
now we know how to do product development. And I don't know which word you use after that, but I thought it was too positive. I think we're not doing a very great job in most cases with product development. And now we're adding AI to the mix. Isn't that going to be the same false promise as we thought that Agile would bring? I mean, if we don't change the organizational structure to become more performant, also change it along with the needs of that new ability that we're bringing into the company, then, it might just do nothing or do the wrong things for the company. Do you agree that it will drastically change the way we run our product development and the organizational structures around it?
I think what's going to happen is a little bit similar to with Agile. When you take a very non-Agile company and you stick on Scrum like duct tape on top or something, they'd normally get a little more effective than before, is my experience, but not a whole lot. It'll kind of stop. So sure, they start introducing daily stand-ups. That's a lot better than not doing daily stand-ups. I'd rather do a waterfall project with daily stand-ups than not. And I'm sure that project will be a little more effective than before. So that's great. But then they stop there. And unless they start revisiting their structure and start thinking about things like cross-functional teams, they're going to miss out. And then other companies that really understand that they need to change the way they work will completely outperform them. And this is what I've been seeing in Agile. There's such a huge difference between companies that really get it and build it into their culture versus companies that just kind of tack it on top. And I think it's going to be the same with AI, that you can keep your current way working and just give everybody access to ChatGPT, and you'll be in a better place than before. But companies that start challenging and reevaluating the core of how they even do work or how they even think about work, I think they're going to drastically outperform other companies. And I think that effect is going to be more radical than it was with Agile. That difference is going to be very big.
And I think do you think there is a correlation between the companies who were able to grasp the Agile and become Agile, now getting more benefit from the AI than the companies who actually failed to adopt Agile properly in the first place? Do you see
Well,
that?
that's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, at a high level, I would guess probably yes, that a company that has adopted an Agile mindset, they tend to be better at dealing with complexity, because that's kind of what Agile is. And they tend to be more open to changing the way you work and learning as you go. That culture is going to be helpful when applying AI. So they're probably better positioned to adapt to this. There is a difference though, because I think AI has a bigger implication. It impacts every role everywhere, more so than what Agile does. So I think what may happen is companies that did not jump onto the Agile train, might have maybe companies that just skip that. Some of them will jump into the AI train and go, wait a sec, because it might come from a different direction. It might come from engineering or from management or something completely out of product development, and they'll be like, whoa, this changes the way we work, and then they start changing everything. So I would guess it's going to be a bit of both, but on average, I would say companies with an Agile mindset are probably better positioned to handle radical disruption, which this is.
Yeah.
Except there's one problem though. Agile itself has become a bit of a dogma. So
Yes.
some companies think of Agile as almost like a religion, and then they're going to struggle in that sense, because you need to question Agile as well, just as much as you question everything else. And if you can't do that, then you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I also see that there is some correlation because I mean the first talks about implication of AI to org design I've heard were about 3-4 years ago already from Craig Alarman, and his main argument was that, well, now since a database engineer with AI can create 100 more databases per hour, and a front-end developer can be, also 100 times more performant, there will not be enough work for narrow specialists. So this AI augmented work will make people easier, to become more cross-functional, full stack.
Yes, I
And
totally
essentially,
agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, and essentially when everybody is able to do full stack and also has the mandate to do full stack work, that's very much into the direction of cross-functional teams, and even full stack team members in cross-functional
Yeah,
teams.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this,
I think the future, or even the present of effective product development, is teams of essentially three beings. One is the customer or the user, one
Mm.
is a developer, and one is an AI agent. And those three, I think, is going to be the ultimate team in most contexts. You wouldn't need more than that, really. I think there's some space for specialists, human specialists, but a lot less than before.
So
Yeah.
are you then also saying, if that's your ideal team, or the team that you predict that will become a team with the three, the customer, the developer, and
Customer,
AI?
developer, and an AI agent.
So,
Yeah.
so that means that people who are facilitating stuff, Scrum Masters, that's going to be replaced as well. Hey, Scrum Master, I don't know how to do this or that, and then you'll ask it to a bot. Is that so? These functions.
First of all, I think there's always going to be roles outside the team. For example, let's say you have 18 of these teams, and you got to synchronize between them. There's going to be always a role for humans to synchronize and organize work, I think. Although I would expect those people to be AI assisted as well. But a Scrum Master is a good example of, just like any role, make a list of what you do and then start questioning everything. And there's going to be some parts that are still left, right? Going and observing what a team is doing, trying to find out how people are feeling, maybe sometimes challenging the system, connecting people across different parts of the organization. All this kind of stuff is pretty human work, right? But things like being the person who knows about Scrum and explains stuff, no, forget it. The team doesn't need you for that. So there's a lot of things that, like facilitating a retro, maybe if the team is not used to it. But there's a lot of, like with most tasks, you just need to challenge it and reshape it. So I think most jobs, like that's a good example of, I would say the Scrum Master job maybe doesn't disappear, but it gets seriously reframed, just like the developer job. For ever since development was invented, a big part of a developer's job has been coding. Now the developer is still needed, but coding is only a very small job. So in that same vein, I think every role is going to go through these rather surprising changes, where part of the job that was considered to be very core is now not core, and then something else becomes more important.
yeah, and to go a bit broader on this topic of how agile also needs to change in the era of AI. I remember we spoke with you about a year ago when you joined one of my classes for Advanced Scrum Masters, and there you shared, I remember one idea. You said you probably see the teams are getting smaller because also across functionality and AI. I wonder, like a year later, do you also see like other trends? Like my question is, how would the agile world change and the world of product development change in general with AI? So smaller teams, I guess, a faster time to market,
Yeah.
faster prototyping. Any changes in the processes, in org design, in the way people plan, organize to work, any other things?
So I guess, well, the things you mentioned, I think, are significant. Smaller teams shipping more often is going to be is a very clear difference. But then there's some things I think that are not going to change, which I think is also important to kind of acknowledge. This is just observation and speculation, right? No one knows about the future, right? But my observation so far and speculation is that some fundamental agile concepts, such as the feedback loop, fast feedback between the people making the product and the people using it, that I think will be as important as ever going forward. And also the importance of working iteratively. Don't build a product all in one go. I think even with a prompt, technically you can go to a good AI model today, and you can basically give it like a waterfall style specification, and it'll build a product out of it. But it won't be a very good product, I think. So it's better to have a product vision and then ask it to implement the first minimum viable, skateboard or something. Just build the first small thing, and then test that with real users and get feedback. That whole way of working, which has been a success formula for Agile, I think is equally important when working with AI. Maybe even more so, because the AI is really fast at building the wrong product, right? So maybe the feedback loop is going to stay very important.
Yeah. Jumping onto the topic of AI agents, which is the main topic of our session today. Like, I think yesterday OpenAI released in America at least this version of Operator, which can actually, work as a human in your browser tab
Yeah.
and click whatever needs to be clicked to book your flight. And I think they do it based on screenshots,
Yes.
analyzing screenshots. So now AI agents are not only your friend and colleague; they also can become your end user.
Yes.
in
Yeah.
your
AI
product.
agents have been kind of blind so far. They only see what you see them. They don't see the world as you see it. And
Right.
that has been a limitation. But now both Anthropic and OpenAI have been building these. It's very early. They're not efficient in any way. They're taking screenshots at a fast rate, interpreting them, sending to an LLM. It's really ridiculous if you think about it. But it's good. I mean, it is a start. It's an embryo. And what you need to think about, what you need to realize within the AI world right now is anything that works, because of the rate of progress is so fast. Anything that works kind of so-so today is likely to work very, very well very soon. So I think it's important that even if you might laugh at the current state of it, take it seriously. This is where things are going. So I think a good mental model for that is we're getting to the point where an agent is the equivalent of a person sitting next to you in front of your screen, kind of. But it's an incredibly fast genius sitting next to you in front of the screen. So you can pair with them, but they're seeing what you're seeing. So if you can just say, hey, can you just book that trip we talked about? I'm going to go have some coffee. Sure, I'll do that. Or can you set up the damn SSL keys and the new GitHub project and just
Right.
fix it?
And I think they are better than humans dealing with complexity and messiness of code and user experience and stuff. So my question is, I guess, if AI agents will be the end users clicking our interfaces, and also they'll be changing the code. So do we need to actually change the way we design the apps to become like user agent friendly in terms of user experience? Or on the other hand, if they don't care, and probably they don't care, then maybe we should not, like in 5 years from now, we don't need to spend that much time dealing with clean code and
Yeah.
user-friendly UI then
That's
too.
a really good, like, I just had a big aha right now when you said that, because I realized when we design products today, we have two types of users in mind: humans and code.
Right.
Right? When you create a user interface, it's for humans. When you create an API, it's for code. Sure, it's humans writing the code, but it is fundamentally code interacting with your API. Therefore, it needs to be exactly specified, and that's just two different users. And now we have a third one. So my guess is in the future, right now, AI agents can interact with user interfaces, essentially acting like a human, or they can interact with APIs, essentially acting like code, or they can write the code to do it for you. But I think probably in the future, it'll make sense as a product developer to think about the three types of users interacting with the system: the humans, the APIs, and the agents. And maybe people will make interfaces that are optimized to make life easier for agents, because it's very inefficient for an agent to have to visually parse a user interface designed for humans. They have different strengths and weaknesses that we could optimize for.
Yeah. And to go back to your metaphor, you said like in the future there will be customer engineer or developer or a product engineer and an agent, right? So customer, product engineer, and an agent. And I guess we're not there yet, but I guess the future is coming. Can you help us like envision how this, like what's a day of work of this triad?
So I can give an example of that, because I had a first-hand experience of it just a month ago, in a more kind of concrete scenario. Very small but concrete. So my wife runs a local ski school here, where I live,
Mhm.
and they have to handle lots of bookings with student groups that have to sign up, and then there's going to be ski teachers being assigned to groups, and then when they're in the slopes, then they got to check off, have the people showed up. You got to make sure people are paid. This is just an administrative system, and the system she uses was really crap, so I built a better one for her a few years ago. And then now that one needed an update. It was kind of getting a bit old and it needed an update. So, and I'm like, well, wait a sec, we have AI now. So I just threw it all away and started from scratch. And then in one weekend, I had a new one. And what I did was, I just showed it to my wife. I set up Cursor, my development environment. She doesn't code. and I just got it running on my computer, and then later I'm going to put it on hers. And then she could run it locally and, book students and just check that everything works. And then I said, if there's anything you're not happy with, instead of asking me, just type in that prompt over there.
Wow.
And you could put a screenshot if you want. And then she did that. So she sat all day and she was having so much fun. I asked her, how is this feeling? She's like, I feel like God. Like, I feel like I could just do whatever without waiting for anyone else. It's so fun. And if I want to fix something, I just fix it. And sometimes she runs into trouble because AIs aren't perfect yet. So sometimes there's going to be issues. So about once per day, I would go in and just clean up the mess. Right? Either she did something and it was implemented in a weird way, but it worked. Then I would go in and check the code, and I would use AI help to clean it up. Or sometimes she would just get stuck, and I showed her how to revert. So if you get into mess, just revert back again and try something simpler. So I would say 80% of what she wanted to do, she could just do. 10% of what she wanted to do, she could do, but sometimes needed to ask me for help. And 10% she couldn't do at all. And then I would do that. So that was my job as developer. So essentially, I needed to spend less time with that, but the time I spent was a lot more qualified. And the net result was she was super happy, I was super happy, and we just got stuff done. This was a small example, but that it became very clear to me that this is the future of development.
And also example, and if I may, so it is like, it's the next level of software customization by the user, cutting the middleman out, essentially. But now imagine there's not only one user and many users, and they all can prompt and change your software, which is no longer your software, but just this software. I mean,
Joey, just to be clear, in this case, it wasn't the students or the ski teachers changing the system. It was her. So she was essentially more like a product manager. And then
I see. Yeah, but if
she
we
was also
allow,
a user.
yeah, but we can also allow the users also to change the way they see things, because maybe they have individual preferences of smaller, bigger fonts.
Oh, wow.
Whatever, right? So that's
interesting.
That's a level.
Maybe we'll get to a point where it's essentially users create their own branches without knowing it. And then if enough users use that one, we'll just apply that one instead for everyone.
It's like this last mile delivery being very specific.
Yeah.
Every user would prefer maybe different. Wow. I don't even know how would you source control that.
Well, maybe you don't have to.
I haven't thought that far. Sorry, what you saying, Roland?
Maybe you don't have to control it anymore because AI will control it for you, possibly. And maybe not good yet, but in the future it will.
Yeah.
And this sounds a bit like Singularity, right? That the user is the developer of the product that they want to use or consume. It becomes one product development.
I guess, I mean, there's a long-term future, but it's so hard to speculate about that. So I tend to more focus on the near term, kind of like where we are now or where we are soon. But in the near term, I would say that product development is still a thing. Product managers are still needed. And a lot of the way the product development, it doesn't change. It's still the same thing. You have code sitting in a repository somewhere. You have things like continuous delivery. You have testing. All these things are still there. It's just how we work with it changes. So in this case, it's the customer immediately just prompting AI instead of prompting a human development team.
So let's go back to reality then, and not let's leave the future in future. So currently, a lot of teams will be empowered to deliver and ship much faster. Okay?
Yes.
We will get more and more releases, faster and faster updates. So are we equally advanced or advancing in the domain of collecting the results of all those releases? How do we make sense of the outcomes, of the impact?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I guess it's going to vary. Just like with Agile, like some companies are going to understand that just shipping more doesn't necessarily mean better. We need to get feedback from it and learn from it. While others will just ship more crap, right? Maybe they're already building something crappy, now they'll just ship more crap faster. So I think we'll get the whole scale of people using this as like with any tool, you can use it effectively or use it ineffectively.
But did you already see, Jose is asking that in the chat, any applications or AI agents that validate outcomes that really focus on that area?
Not yet. So I'm looking forward to that happening because I see things moving in that direction very quickly. Because if we look at the kind of microscopic scale, starting with just writing code, right? Traditional coding is you type code by hand. And then you see if it works, and if it didn't work, you fix it. And when it works, you ship it. And if you're a really good team, you'll also get customer feedback from what you shipped, right? Now with AI, okay, for a year ago, you would typically copy code from your IDE, from your development environment into a web browser to ChatGPT, ask it to fix something, and manually integrate it back in again, which is pretty error prone, but it's still more effective than writing it by hand. Nowadays with Cursor, copy paste goes away. You just type in the chat and it makes changes. And recently they added Cursor agents, which is rather mind-blowing because now when you ask it to change something, you don't need to give it the context. It'll find the context by itself, by just digging around. And it'll not only make the change, it'll also check that it works. For example, using linting, like checking that the code compiles. And if you ask it, it can also run it and check that it still works. So now you get this feedback loop where it's basically building your product, testing it as it goes. So following that trajectory, I find it quite natural that we'll soon get to a point where the agent also will follow up. We'll ship stuff and follow up with customers, or at least look at some metrics maybe to see, maybe run some A/B tests and see what's going on. That's a natural progression, but we're not quite there yet.
And there's a related question in the chat from Robin. If you have seen, Henrik, examples of acceptance test driven development, the BDD, where humans would specify the tests and the agents will essentially follow up on that with the code and metrics and the feedback loop.
Yeah, it's the whole BDD/TDD thing is super interesting, and that is all being turned upside down. And I still don't know where it's landing. It's very interesting. My first insight was, okay, I can now choose. I can write some code first and then ask it to generate a test. That's fine. Or I can ask it to generate a test and then ask it to generate the code. You can go either way. I can take an existing code base and say, just add tests. And then it'll refactor first and then add tests, which is fantastic. What I've noticed now, though, is I almost never use tests anymore, which is a surprise to me because I've always been a bit of a testing nerd when it comes to TDD and BDD. But I've noticed that I don't need them anymore, hardly, except for it's really only for my own comfort sometimes, because the AI models are so good they don't make mistakes really, as humans do. They don't make clumsy mistakes, at least when you have the good models. When they do something wrong, it's normally because your prompt wasn't any good. But once you learn to give it the right context, and especially with Cursor agents where it can search for the right context, then I find that there's test needs in some cases, but generally speaking, when the code works, it just works. And if I, in the future, suspect some problem, I'll ask it to write a test on the fly. Same thing with documentation. I've noticed that now, instead of having human-maintained documentation, I ask it to generate documents when it's needed. And it does that by reading the source code. So the document becomes 100% correct every time. And then sometimes I put that document, I just did that 10 minutes before this meeting. I asked it to write a document about some part of the system, and I put that into my repo as a document describing a subsystem. And the reason why I did that was because as a human, it's nice to be able to read to understand what's going on. And sometimes I give that document, or the document becomes useful to the agent as well, because then it doesn't need to rediscover how everything works. It can look at the document. And if I ever, in my standing prompt for Cursor, I said, if you ever find any discrepancy between the document and the real code, let me know and also suggest how to update the document. So then it becomes self-maintaining. So that approach with both documents and tests I find really useful. But yeah, overall, I would say that you need to, just like with everything else, you need to rethink the nature of testing. Why do you write a test? Who is it for? When do you use it? And I think the net result is going to be, at least for companies that are used, for teams that are used to writing a lot of test automation, you'll probably do less of it and have it more focused for some specific areas where the AI is a little bit weak.
How do you treat your AI colleague these days? Is it a junior developer or is it an architect? I just had an experience this week where I was building a prototype with a lot of business logic. And then I asked it, after it was working, I asked it to actually add tests, and it did. And I said, did you run it? I bet they will not run. And then it ran it, and of course the tests were read. And then I asked the Claude in Cursor to actually fix the tests. So sometimes it says it's done without actually checking on itself. So sometimes I think it's super smart and it can advise me on the architecture. And sometimes it's a bit clumsy, like a junior developer who you need to ask to test its own code and run its own tests. So I guess it's just a temporary, state where we are with the models, and it will improve over time. But how do you, Henrik, treat your, AI companion these days? Junior,
So
architect, friend?
yeah, I've noticed that when it comes to the role that the agent takes, it's really kind of up to me to tell it what role it should have, because it has a bit of an identity crisis, because it is used to being just this dumb thing that you just prompt, fix this, and it does exactly what you said and nothing else. And now with agent, it's getting more responsibilities. But at the same time, most humans don't expect the agent to spontaneously start refactoring things unless you ask for it. But a senior developer might expect to do that. So that it feels like the AI is trying to discover where it fits in. And what you need to do as a human is explain your expectations. So don't assume that it knows what you want. Explain in your standing instructions. In Cursor, you have this file called cursor rules. We can give standing instructions. And if you wanted to, for example, whenever you make a change, run the test and check if it works still. Just tell it that. Then gradually it will kind of adapt to your work way. And I'll get back to you, Mark, in a moment. I realized I didn't answer Alex's question. So how do I see it? I think of it as a senior co-developer, essentially. So we have a relationship where basically it writes all the code, except for some specific cases. But when it comes to architecture, I kind of drive the architecture. I own architecture, and I use it as a sounding board. So in terms of ownership, that's probably the difference. I own the architecture. It kind of owns the code, and that whenever I want to make a change, I generally ask it to make the change.
Okay, Mark, do you know?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about software, and for a lot of nice products, it's very nice, but many significant changes for the world are hardware related, like telco networks being better, or heat pumps, or electricity grids, or more and more equipment in your house to do things yourself instead of buying.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Because that's usually mentioned to be harder to change, because you have a lot of investment in doing stuff. But how do you see that with AI? Can that be?
Yeah, well, first of all, a lot of hardware development is actually software. There's software inside your dishwasher, and the software inside your car, and software basically is everywhere. But there is a hard limitation there, where if the software is physically inside a device, then how does AI change that device, right? With Tesla, you can push out new software. With phones, you can push out new software. With the dishwasher, maybe not. So there's a hard limitation, where the only way to update it is to put in a USB stick. Okay, the AI doesn't have a hand. So there's a limitation. So the physical world is a constraint right now that kind of makes it a lot harder. Anything that just involves knowledge work, AI can essentially do now, more or less effectively. With code, it can do it super effectively. With web browsing, it's kind of clunky and not too reliable, but it's getting there. When it comes to hardware, it's very early, right? We're starting to see embodied AI work happening, where people are making factory machines, factory robots that are built to do any kind of task, and where the task is controlled by software. And what basically happens then is you're taking work that previously was hardware work, configuring a machine to do one specific task, and instead you're building a generalist machine and then using software to drive the task. And if software drives the tasks, well then AI can drive the software. So now AI can control this machine. So that seems to be the trend. Embodied AI, building machines where AI can kind of control the machine. But as it is right now, you can't have AI go make you some toast. So that's a limitation.
Yeah, and so basically you developed your hardware to be more dependent on the software and less on the hardware.
Yeah, and this is not a new trend, right? This was before AI. I think and Tesla is a good example of that, where your Tesla is updated not by driving to some shop, but instead it gets software pushed out from the net. So more and more stuff that used to be hardware controlled are now more generic and driven by software.
Thanks. Any more questions, guys, from the audience?
I have one.
Please go.
So a lot of organizations I come, they're sort of afraid for this, because oh no, they see my source code, or oh no, I have data that they cannot see. And obviously some organizations don't, but what do you answer to those people being afraid of that, especially like compliancy officers?
Yeah, I normally have to define what they mean by they and what they mean by see.
I'm sorry?
You said they're afraid that they are going to see my code.
Yeah, so like the
So who is they and what is see?
ChatGPT's Copilots, that kind of organization, or any other. And of course, you can put it. The simple answer is you can host it yourself. But
Because the reason why I ask it that way is because then I ask the follow-up question: who can see your code today? And that normally boils down to, wait a sec, where's our code stored? Maybe it's stored in GitHub. Okay, Microsoft can see your code. They own GitHub. Why do you put your code in GitHub? Do you ever send emails with sensitive information? Okay, where does that email go? Do you ever store documents in Office 365 or Google Cloud? Or do you ever use Gmail? We basically use cloud services all the time, everywhere. So what companies need to understand is this is like a cloud service, and they need to evaluate it with the same lens as any other cloud service. What information do we put in the cloud, and which provider are we giving it to, or is responsible for that? And what do the terms and conditions say? And do we trust them or not? So I wouldn't treat AI separately in that sense. But then the follow-up question is, of course, all right, then are we okay with our code being sent to, for example, Anthropic, which is what happens when you use Claude inside Cursor. A lot of your code is being sent to Anthropic, technically. And the question is, do we trust them or not? And if not, then maybe we shouldn't, right? And then, okay, what are the options? Well, run a local LLM or host some other LLM somewhere else. But it's always going to be the same question, because where are you running the local LLM? Are you running it in your basement in the company? Maybe not. You're putting it in the cloud somewhere. Who are you trusting? So it all boils down to who do you trust and where do you put stuff? I think it's an important conversation to have, but I wouldn't. I like to put it in the same bucket of general cloud services and information security.
I like that. Good approach.
But I also want to add to that also is that when weighing risk, you always need to look at both sides. You need to look at what is the risk of using AI with our development, but also what is the risk of not doing it. And the risk of not doing it may be that you will be incredibly unproductive compared to competitors, and that of course carries a business risk, which you also need to weigh in.
We spoke about this as Roland said, singularity between the customer and the code and the solution. We haven't spoke much about business to IT relationships, and there's a question from Raul that I think worth discussing is, Henrik, how can you see AI/AI agents being helpful to bridge the gap which is still there between the business and IT?
That reminds me of something very funny that someone said. I think it was, I don't remember, and maybe it was the NVIDIA CEO, but that the IT department in the future are going to become the HR department for the AI agents.
Yeah.
Big transformation. I think there's some truth to that. But like everything else, it's the whole nature of having an IT department needs to be revisited. Although that was the case even when we started working in an agile way, right? That why do we have these different departments? What is that a sensible way of structuring an organization? And maybe not.
Yeah. So if R&D department is HR for AI agents, then do we still need this separation? Like the business department can also HR the AI agents. Like do you think the AI era, AI revolution will eventually help us to finally bridge this gap, which agile transformations in many cases were promised to but did not deliver on? Business?
Probably not, because humans are still humans, no matter how good AI becomes.
Which means a business is going to use AI locally for its own technical purposes and R&D for its own, but these big silos will still kind of hang around for.
Yeah, again, I think my guess is it's going to be similar to Agile, that some companies will really get it and they'll make really productive changes, and some will stay with old ways and use AI just as a small, minor local improvement, which might be okay. Because to be cynical, some companies are big enough and rich enough that they can afford to be inefficient.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
Well, but other companies can't, and the companies that can't afford to be efficient will either die or start changing the way they work and adopt AI kind of at all levels.
While you were giving this last explanation, I was wondering about liability. What if a company really invests in heavily using AI, and what if this AI, makes mistakes? Then who's going to be ultimately responsible? Do we think about this?
A lot of discussion is about that. I think it's not quite a new question because it's the same thing that if I use a third party for something and something goes wrong, exactly who is responsible.
True.
If I use my telephone to commit crime, is it the telephone provider's fault or my fault? Or there's all these weird kind of ethical edge cases, and it's going to be similar, right? The car crashed. It was being driven autonomously. Whose fault is it? Or this AI agent started sharing every email address with the world in this company because it thought it would be a good idea. Whose fault is it? The guy who wrote the prompt, the people who didn't monitor what it's doing, the people who made the model? I think the lawyers are going to have a lot of work to do, but
Yeah.
So
and the lawyer AIs.
So in the future, AI agent suing each other for things they did.
That's going to be a thing, probably. I don't know. Holy crap! Yeah.
Yeah. We like to finish in a few minutes, and we have a few more questions. So Steiner.
Yeah.
Thank you. So questions in regards to no-code AI tools. If you have some experiences with some of them, and if some are more mature than others. I tried Replit a little bit on Data Button. Also heard about this Bubble, but do you have any thoughts on that?
So I've tinkered with some of them, and I think the technology it's quite immature. So I would say those kind of things are, at least right now, very useful for building either prototypes or very simple apps for some specific purpose. And then it's great. For anything more complex, I think there needs to be human involvement in the coding in one way or another. For now, but who knows in a year? I don't know.
Thanks.
And that's kind of why I like Cursor, because you still have control over the code. It's still your code, but it just does most of the work. But it's not hiding it from you. It's not putting it inside a black box, and that's nice.
Yeah, like in Lean, they say automation with a human touch. So now it's AI with a human touch.
Yeah.
AI with a human touch. Mark, I guess your last question.
Yeah, so you mentioned AI agent as in singular. Would it be plural? Do you expect one agent to connect other agents that you have to talk to one? Or will there be a skill of figuring out what kind of agents you need in your context and jobs and consultancy for that? Or what?
This is something we talk about every day in my company. We're really exploring this right now. It's very interesting, very concrete case. Right now, we're building a research agent for one of our clients. Should it be one agent that searches for news, analyzes it, and sends it to the right people? Or do we have one agent whose job is to find news and put it in a queue, another agent who analyzes it, and a third agent that maybe customize it to some specific person? I don't know yet really what it's going to be. I know that we're going to need agents talking to agents, and we have built that into our platform already. And I think there's going to be agents talking to other agents in other companies. The question is, when do we have a team of agents working together, and when do we do one agent? That's something that lots of companies are exploring, and I guess we'll just see where that lands.
Yeah, I guess it's about architecture of your agentic space. It's like micro.
And also about usability as a user. Does it make sense for me to give instructions to 5 different team members? Or is that confusing? Is it better to give instruction to one person, but maybe that agent instructs 5 different team members behind the scenes? So it's all kinds of interesting. I think it's a very interesting field, but I would say it's very much in a discovery phase right now. But agents talking to agents is a crucial thing. I would say anybody building an agent platform needs to have inter-agent communication in there as part of it. It's really important. The question is just, when do you use it and how do you use it?
Wow, we've already reached the 1 o'clock sign.
Amazing. Let's agree. We spoke about the future a lot, which is unknown. Let's agree to meet in a year.
And then we can laugh. We can look at the recording and laugh at it.
At 12 p.m. and laugh at our false prediction.
Yes.
And discuss where we are and what's the next year's.
That's perfect. I like that.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Enjoyed it a lot. Super great conversations.
Amazing crowd. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.